What up, Monero Matteo? Welcome back. Yeah, this is going to be a fun episode tonight. I've got some really key information for you guys to go through. There are just a lot of things that seem to be really coming together for our position, and it's not necessarily the greatest of news, but we've always taken a sober approach to looking at what's been going on in the world. I've told you guys not to really freak out about anything. There's nothing to worry about. We're very positive and peaceful here, but nevertheless, we've looked at the world for what it is, and we've tried to come up with some analysis which makes Monero make sense. And I think that the super hyper mega bullish case, our Monero macro thesis, is really starting to work out. And the only thing that hasn't really come together yet is the recognition by market participants that what we have seen and what we've predicted coming to pass is coming to pass. And I don't know when that's going to happen. But one thing that's interesting that I am seeing is a recognition by the half of the Bitcoin bros that Monero is a threat. I'm seeing more and more Bitcoin bros come out there and try to talk about Monero's inflation bug potential problem, which isn't really much of an issue. Monero's been audited many times. You can check out the amount of Coinbase and the amount of block rewards there are. And there are great talks on this by Sarang Nother. He talks very intelligently about this particular issue. It's not the issue that a lot of the Bitcoin bros and just a lot of people in general make it out to be. We've talked about that before. I'm not going to go so much into it. But you're seeing more people talk about that. You're seeing people talk about how it's not as scalable as Bitcoin, even though with Bitcoin, the question then becomes like, what are you scaling if it's not fungible on the base layer? So we're seeing the scaling debate come into play. And then you see some people talking about how they want to attack Monero because, it's too much of a threat to Bitcoin. And if we take down Monero and Ethereum, because they don't like Ethereum either, by spamming the blockchain and making it difficult for people to use, then we're going to get more people to come to the Bitcoin side of things. And so there's a sense of desperation coming about on behalf of the Bitcoin bros. And maybe it's because they are seeing what we're seeing too, and there's like a sense of subconscious concern that what they're holding isn't going to be the ideal thing to hold in the dystopian future that we seem to be moving into. You're not going to want trackable and traceable currency. Now, you guys who have watched the show for a while, that's a no-brainer. And it should be a no-brainer to just about anybody else. But for whatever reason, they don't see the encroachment of the KYC. They don't see the global tax system coming to fruition. They don't see the implications of price controls. And there's one person that we're going to get to by the name of Lawrence Leopard, who's a gold guy, and he's a pretty smart guy. I like him. He's a likable guy too. But he looked at one piece of news that we're going to get to today, and he's like, yeah, this is going to mean shortages because the UN is talking about now how they want to do price controls, or how they're suggesting price controls to all the governments instead of, raising rates to control inflation, which is causing a lot of problems in the credit markets and, is going to cause recessions everywhere, et cetera. How about we just cut the rates again, and dealing with inflation, we'll just do price controls. That's what they're talking about now. And also cutting down, quote unquote, on the speculation of commodities, which to me seems to indicate that they want to limit the price action of commodities. They want to do a price ceiling on commodities, which is what it sounds like to me. So price controls for commodities, probably for consumable goods as well. And they also want to do windfall taxes, which we're going to get to as well, which essentially puts a cap on the profits that oil companies and other commodity producers will be making in this time to come, because there are going to be shortages. There's going to be high demand for those commodities and for those goods, which means they're going to make more profits because they're going to have the capacity to increase the prices. And so the Liz Warrens of the world, they're going to be like, these corporations, these evil corporates, they're scamming us dry. And it's like, okay, well, you're going to do the windfall taxes, which means they're going to be less incentivized to do the work. Just like if you put a high income tax on somebody, they're going to be less incentivized to go past that certain point of wealth, right? Like if you got, a 90% income tax rate on somebody who makes over $400,000 a year, they're going to get to the $400,000 a year number, and then they're just going to be like, I'm going to take a vacation, right? So, again, this is all part of the panic. This is all part of the whole whack-a-mole thing that they're trying to do, where they've got problems cropping up everywhere because of policies which have taken place not just since 2008, but even before that. There's been significant There's been a significant lack of investment in commodities and in natural resources. There's been this whole green climate change revolution happening where oil and other cheap, plentiful, and reliable sources of energy have been neglected for investment as well as just frowned upon. And so that's played into the psychology for a number of years. And so there's been malinvestment, or not malinvestment, but just a lack of investment in nuclear and in natural gas, et cetera. And all the stuff with Ukraine is going to play into that with the closure of pipelines from Russia and the blowing up of pipelines, which is a whole other thing. But yeah, and that's going to cause supply issues as well. And so there are all these problems now coming home to roost, okay, which they're going to try to fix, or at least make it look like they're fixing, and ultimately just make things work in the process. And one of those things is price controls, right? And with price controls, okay, it's interesting because the central banks of the world, they've been doing price ceilings on bonds, or rather price floors, okay? They've been, they brought down interest rates for the last 12 years or so in order to try to liquefy markets with money and to encourage borrowing and to encourage spending, so that there isn't a deflationary spiral. But what that's done is it's destroyed the demand for those bonds, right? Because that's what happens when you create a price floor for the bonds. They can't go past a certain level. Well, the same thing is going to happen with price controls, except it's not going to be with demand, it's going to be with supply, because the demand is going to change for these goods, just as supply is, because if there is a demand for a good that is going consistently in a shortage, or ever more in a shortage, well, then you're going to have to raise the prices in order to equal that out, in order to make sure that the market forces function and the price signal is sent for more of that good to be created, right? So they're just going to make problems worse, of course. But our thesis has been since the beginning that's going to lead to rationing. It's good because another problem is going to be cropping up with the shortages caused by the price controls, and then you're going to have black markets crop up because people are going to want more than the rationed amount. And what is the cryptocurrency du jour, which has taken over the dark webs in the black markets? Well, it's Monero, increasingly. And I'm not seeing anybody talk about this in the crypto space, really. Nobody is talking about this in Bitcoin land. It's like everybody's acknowledging this, or almost nobody, but the people who are, they're acknowledging this, but they're not like drawing the conclusions that need to be drawn. And they know about Monero. They know about Monero, but they just don't want to say anything for some reason. They don't want to draw those conclusions. I'm not sure what it is. But let's get into the content. This is going to be an interesting show. There's even more to talk about with the expansion of KYC and AML, with a new bill that they want to stick into the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, which is going to significantly expand the reporting requirements for not only banks, but also for crypto exchanges, accounting companies, third-party payment service providers, et cetera, which is going to increase the financial panopticon that all of us are a part of, which is going to, again, increase the demand for Monero. So let's get into this. There's a lot to discuss, but first, I have an announcement. Before you guys forget, just as I talked about a few videos ago, we are going to have at St. Mary of Egypt Orthodox Church down in Roswell, Georgia, a festival. Is the Fall Festival. You can try some Russian and Georgian food. There's going to be children activities. And by the way, Luke Smith said he is going to attend. So I know a lot of you guys are fans of Luke Smith. So if you want to come meet him, he says, God willing, he'll be able to make it both days, Saturday and Sunday. I'm only going to be able to show up Sunday because tax day is October 15th. You guys know I'm an accountant bro, which means I got to work. So come check it out. It's a good introduction to Orthodoxy. I think you guys will get a lot out of it. You're going to meet some great people. And I think that you'll like what you see there. You'll like what you see there. And I think it's very important, this thing, the Orthodox Church, of course. I think it's more important to get the word out about that than just about anything else, because really in the world, I think it's a heart issue. It's a soul issue. I think a lot of people in crypto overemphasize how much good can come from the adoption of crypto. Central banks, not good. I understand, but ultimately it's a heart issue, and if I can bring one person to the Orthodox Church, that's going to be more meaningful to me than the thousands I could bring to Monero. That's just my personal perspective. I can't talk about theology, though. I'm not smart enough for that. All I can do is just say, hey, Orthodoxy is awesome. Come check it out. Now let's talk about Monero for like 3 hours. So that's my shout out for that. Quick news item here that I want to get to. I've been talking about gold and silver a little bit recently. It's going to be interesting over the next few months here, because there seems to be something going on with the COMEX. There seems to be a draining on the physical reserves at the COMEX. And I've told you guys that, gold and silver, heavily manipulated, and these are inflation barometers, so they have every incentive to manipulate them, especially because silver is an industrial asset and commodity, which is used in the manufacturing goods. So you want to keep that down because you don't want the goods to become more expensive and exacerbate inflation. So we're starting to see the COMEX perhaps start to lose control of the paper derivatives price, which is essentially what sets the price, because the underlying asset, the physical asset upon which those derivatives are based, are seeping out of the vaults. Now, they're probably going eastward because Russia, India, China, they've been stocking up on this stuff for the last decade and a half. I mean, they've seen this day coming where the dollar starts to have a lot of structural problems and the world reserve currency comes into question. And so they've been building up their stockpiles. And, I think that they have every incentive for the price to go up to increase their FX reserve positions. And so maybe this is one of the ways that the East retaliates against the West for everything that's been going on geopolitically, is they are able to take more control over the gold and silver markets, and then through market dynamics that they'll probably, to be fair, control, they are going to allow the price to raise quite a bit. So that's something I'm looking out for. Just keep an eye on that. I think that's going to be interesting. QTR has talked a little bit about this too. He's got more charts here if you want to look into it. This is one chart that's talking about, or that's showing the draining of the supply of the COMEX over the last year or so. There's a consistent trend. And with trends like this, you never know when something snaps and it turns into a panic, or something happens which really exacerbates this trend line. Sort of like what we saw with the UK bonds over the last few weeks. Like first you had a small sell-off, and then you had like a panic on the behalf of the pension funds. They dumped a whole lot of the treasuries. That started to spiral downwards, and then the Bank of England had to jump into the market in order to save it from crashing into the abyss. So you never know what's going to happen. Just something to look out for. That's something on my radar. And I always tell you guys, I think it's a good idea to have gold and silver before you even have Monero. Not financial advice, but I do think that with everything going on with the electrical infrastructure, with everything going on in the world right now, it's just good to have a physical asset that is private, by the way, but isn't reliant on any kind of infrastructure that's out of your control. Because cryptocurrency kind of requires it requires civilization to carry on to some degree. It requires some level of functionality within your local area. And as we just saw recently in Bangladesh, 140 million people lost access to power. And you've got rolling blackouts happening in Europe and in California. So it's a good idea, I think, to just have some physical assets in your reserve. I think that's a good idea. But obviously the next step is holding Monero, in my opinion. Duh. So this is Stoic XMR. He's a bro. Really liking his tweets. He's got a lot of good info out there. Go give him a follow. He says Monero nodes, 11,829 as Monero.fail, as per Monero.fail. And then he says Bitcoin nodes, 14,694 per bit nodes. So Monero nodes, wow, there's a lot of them compared to Bitcoin. Yeah, that's quite something. That's just an interesting statistic. You can extrapolate that however you want to. But yeah, Monero is outside of Bitcoin, probably the most used cryptocurrency, at least for its original use case, the crypto's original use case, which is private, decentralized, peer-to-peer cash. or just peer-to-peer cash in general, but how we think. I mean, if it's not fungible, it's not true money. But yeah, Monero adoption continuing to explode. The transaction volumes are continuing to explode, and I think that's going to continue, especially given the news we're about to go through. So let's move on. Here's some more adoption metrics for you guys. It's from Howard Chu. He says, Monero is made to be spent, still less than 1% of Bitcoin's market cap, but Monero users vastly outnumber every other crypto token in actuality using a coin. Right. So here are the stats from coincards.com. For the USA, you've got Monero transactions or purchases comprising 56.5% of all the purchases. So that's really quite something. And then Bitcoin on chain is the next one at 26%. It's quite astonishing, but we still have Canada up here really causing us to facepalm a bit, especially with everything that happened with the Canadian Freedom Convoy protests. It's like, okay, well, you guys are just going to do what you do. I mean, you got to clean your house, buckos, but Bitcoin's at 51.5%, Ethereum at 60%. I mean, even Ethereum's being used more than Monero. What? That's kind of crazy. And then we've got, all in all, Bitcoin at 45%, Monero at 22%. But still, you have Monero being used quite a lot. And that's the whole point of cryptocurrency, is to be used, to be spent. And it's really quite fantastic that we also had Cake Wallet with Cake Pay come out recently, which makes it so that you can spend your Monero at Moe's and at supermarkets and IHOPs and thousands upon thousands of other stores. I haven't even had the time to get through all of them. But adoption's really, really picking up. I mean, at this point, you could make a living just off Monero. I mean, with all the places that you could go with your Monero and with the people that you can transact with, if they're in your local circle, you could really live off this stuff. I mean, no joke. And instead of focusing on price, I think one thing that's important that I confess I need to do more of myself is to get people within your inner circle and to get people who would otherwise be part of a very important local supply chain onto this stuff. So what do I mean? I think you need to get your local farmer onto Monero. I think you need to get your local auto mechanic onto Monero. Get your local gold and silver bullion shop onto this stuff. I told you guys how important that is because gold, silver, accepted everywhere. It's always convertible for cash. So if you can get a local bullion and gold dealer to accept Monero, well, guess what? You can get your Monero and go into any currency you want to effectively if you've got that bridge, which is made of gold and silver effectively. So that's important too. But get people who can perform very essential duties to accept Monero. And if you do that, then you're not going to be so worried about the price because you're going to have an out. You're going to have an out. And when the shortages come, and with the technocracy coming, which is going to spawn everything that you're doing financially with the CBDC or with Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever, you're going to have a way to snuggle under the Monero covers there, drive around in your Monero-mobile, and be able to survive without the Eye of Sauron being locked on you. So that's going to be awesome, right? So that reminds me. There was somebody who reached out to me. Carl, what's up, Carl? I had received an email from a gentleman named Carl. I don't know where you're from, bro, but you said that you're going to be coming up with a document to present to people of a particular country about Monero. Let me see if I can pull up that email because that really interested me. Good luck, Carl. If there's anything we can do to support, let me know. But, yeah, there's Monero adoption happening all over the place. I'm not going to pull it up. But if you guys are able to succeed in getting somebody local onto Monero, let me know because I want to know the successes that are happening. We used to do the Monero Marketing Mondays. I don't know if you guys remember, but there are businesses opening all the time that accepted Monero. And I'm thinking myself about opening an accounting firm that accepts Monero. Let me know what you guys think about that. I get people who reach out to me sometimes for tax advice and for like crypto advice and stuff like that. I've been thinking about it. If you guys are interested in having an account that accepts Monero, and maybe you're a business who wants to have Monero on your balance sheet or something like that, even though that idea to some people is anathema, let me know. Let me know. It's just an intellectual exercise I'm kind of running through my head right now, but maybe it'll concretize. Maybe it'll concretize. I still have to get my CPA. I have an enrolled agent license, but I still have to get my CPA. Excuse me, just had dinner. But anyways, getting distracted. Here are some adoption metrics. Coin cards usage. We just went through that. Monero is steadily increasing. Merchant acceptance. We're still a little bit behind. It looks like Bitcoin Cash and Litecoin. Roger Ver does a lot of Bitcoin Cash adoption, to be fair, down in the Caribbean or wherever he's at. Respect to him. Respect to anybody who's getting people onto crypto. I think that's fantastic because I think those people at some point will discover Monero and just start using that. So I think anyone who's getting people interested in crypto and using crypto for their small business operations or for whatever, I think are doing something which is productive and something which has a high capacity to be good. So moving on, here's some other stuff. But yeah, those are the main things I wanted to discuss. But let's get to the main news of tonight. Or at least one of the things anyway. Check it out. The UN demands all central banks stop rate hikes and switch to price controls instead. And by the way, let me source properly. This is Morpheus. Cool, bro. He's on Twitter. I think it's Morpheus, but yeah. This is by our bro Tyler Durden from Zero Hedge. So this is talking about the UN report, which was released recently. It says right here, the UN agency dealing with global trade demanding all, quote-unquote, central banks stop rate hikes and instead switch to price controls. Okay, so, I mean, I'm not trying to be prideful, but we told you this was coming. We've been screaming from the rooftops. This is what their next move is going to be. I mean, just 2 videos ago, we said, I'm fairly confident that they're going to do price controls next because they can't continue to raise rates like this to try to taper down inflation. They're going to break everything. We started to see things break all over the place in Japan and in China and in the UK. And so they're going to have to go back to zero. They're going to have to cut again. But they're going to have to control inflation too. Because if they start cutting again, that's going to indicate that they lost the war to inflation. They can't beat it. And so that means they're going to have to use other methods to do it. And it's not like local governments could come out and advocate for this stuff, even though we have been seeing that in many, many countries. I mean, there was one video, I think it was the It's All Coming Together, Monero macro thesis. We talked for like 20, 30 minutes about the adoption of price controls all over the world. It's happening. But if you have a global organization which isn't accountable to anybody and is totally unelected, getting that idea out there, saying that, hey, we're here to save the world or whatever, here are our suggestions, then that's going to open the door for a lot of politicians in national environments to say, hey, maybe this is a good idea. We're part of this conversation. We're working with our partners all over the world, whatever, in order to try to stop inflation, which is a global crisis, blah, blah, blah. And we decided price controls would be a good idea. So that's going to come. It says, they argue, quote unquote, policymakers appear to be hoping that a sharp monetary shock along the lines, if not of the same magnitude as that pursued under Paul Volcker, will be sufficient to anchor inflationary expectations without triggering recession. Impossible. Not going to happen. Sifting through the economic entrails of a bygone era is unlikely, however, to provide the forward guidance needed for a softer landing given the deep structural and behavioral changes that have taken place in many economies, particularly those related to financialization, market concentration, and labor's bargaining powers. Okay, so what is it saying there? Okay, it's saying that it's too tough structurally to do what Paul Volcker did back in the 70s, which is essentially hike rates to 20% to kill inflation, by the way, cause a huge recession. So we're going to have to use other means, price controls. I think that's what that means. All right, so this is the article I wanted to get to. We must change course. It's from CNBC.com. The UN warns the world is on the brink of recession. Yeah, it's on the brink of something worse than that if they don't stop hiking interest rates. But they say we still have time to step back from the edge of recession. Nothing is inevitable. We must change course. Right, and you can always rely on your unelected bureaucratic gods of the universe to say nothing is inevitable. I mean, guys, didn't you know that they can stop the climate from changing if we just give them enough power? I mean, don't you believe that with all your heart? That we just need communism again, except with, anyways, we call then for a more pragmatic policy. Pragmatism. We can always expect our trust fund overlords from the United Nations to engage in pragmatic policies, can't we? Mix that deploy strategic price controls. Interesting. Strategic price controls, guys. So it's not like price controls have failed everywhere they've been tried over the last 5,000 years. We just haven't done them strategically enough. We just need to plan a little bit more before we do the price controls. I mean, there's nothing intrinsically screwy about what they're doing with market dynamics when they do price controls, which leads to consequences that are, I guess at this point, 5,000 years later, still unforeseen. But no, it's just not strategic enough. The same thing with the socialists and the communists. Like, for the last 100 years, they just haven't been doing it right. Like, once we get power, we'll do it right this time. Okay, it's the whole thing, right? Windfall taxes, antitrust measures, tighter regulations on commodity speculation. Now, this is interesting. Tighter regulations on commodity speculation. Now, let me know in the comments what you think that means. But to me, what that sounds like is they're going to limit the value of oil and energy in general from going up, or the market value. They're going to put a price ceiling on the value of energy. That's what it sounds like to me. It may be copper, it may be other commodities. Food, we'll see. And if it's food, yeah, you're going to have rationing. That's what that has to mean. And tighter regulations on commodity speculation, I can easily see that going to cracking down on black markets for this stuff, because that's what that kind of activity is going to make, right? Just like the sanctions on Russian energy. Like the Europeans, they started to import that same energy coming from Russia, except through China. So they sanction Russia to make it look like they're the good guys. We're fighting the Russians by making it so that they can just sell it to everybody else at a discount. And then we're going to, buy it back from China at a 30% markup? China being the biggest polluter on Earth, by the way, because they believe in the whole climate change thing, right? So none of it makes sense. It's not supposed to. It's a scam. But anyways, what I wanted to get to also down here was, did we talk about windfall tax? Okay, let's quickly go through what a windfall tax is. In case you guys don't know, windfall tax is levied by governments against certain industries when economic conditions allow those industries to experience above average profits. Right. So oil companies, they're going to be experiencing above average profits. But they're going to get hella tax for it. You guys remember, it was only 2 years ago that the price of oil went negative because they ran out of places to put the oil. Like, they couldn't shut down the oil production because it cost too much to start it back up after it's already started. And so they just kept putting it into storage facilities and onto tankers. And the demand was down because they started the lockdowns. But they had to keep production going, which means they started to pay people to just take the oil. They're like, take it off our hands. We'll pay you to do it. Do whatever you want with it. And so oil companies lost a crap load of money because the oil price went negative. They killed demand for it. But now that things are coming back, they want to tax the oil companies down the profits, which they need to make. One, because of what we just discussed back in 2020, they lost a lot of money. And two, because there's been underinvestment over the last 20 years in the oil industry because of the whole green thing and because of the rise of tech. And it was just recently that ExxonMobil in market cap passed Facebook. First time in, I think, 10 years, something like that. So now that energy companies are starting to profit again because of all the terrible mistakes which have been made by these governments, which are so strategic, right, and so pragmatic. Now they want to tax them. So, and again, you tax that which you want less of, and you subsidize that which you want more of. That's basically how incentives work. So they're going to tax the oil companies. So it's not enough that they shut down nuclear power plants. It's not enough that they're blowing up pipelines, literally. It's not enough that they're shutting down pipelines here in the States, the Keystone Pipeline. It's not enough that they've underinvested in all these things. Now they want to have windfall taxes on the people producing the energy, the residual energy that we need, to just get by, right? And the strategic petroleum reserve is continuing to be depleted for political purposes largely. And yeah, now they're doing this. It's like, what bad idea can you guys brainstorm up next? But that's what we've anticipated. It's going to be fine. We're well prepared. But let's see if I can find the part where they said they wanted to do wealth taxes. So Control F, wealth. Okay, here we go. So it says here, there should be more public investment in economic and social infrastructure to boost employment, raise productivity, improve energy efficiency, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So let me ask you, what's more important right now? People eating and staying warm or reducing greenhouse gas emissions? How much do you guys really trust the science is the question. How much are we to trust the science? Because as far as anyone's concerned, the science for the last 2 years has gotten millions of people killed and irreparably damaged mentally with the lockdowns and with the stabbies and with everything. So do you guys trust the science enough to continue on this path of reducing the production of cheap, reliable, and abundant energy? I forgot where I was going with that. But do you guys have that confidence? I don't think so. So moving on. Government should consider tax reforms, including more wealth and windfall taxes. Boom. So check it out. Wealth taxes. And we've talked about unrealized capital gains tax here forever. That's basically what that is. It's just another word for it. Because what is a wealth tax? Let's go through that real quick. This is from nerdwallet.com. They say a wealth tax is a tax on net worth, which is generally the difference between someone's assets and liabilities. So it's a tax on assets. And if your assets are valued at a certain time to be X, then that's what they're taxing. And that could comprise of assets which have been appreciated through market value. So let's say you have like $1 million in Ethereum. You're like a super rich bro. The UN juggernauts are about to tax you at your wazoo. And so they're going to do a wealth tax on you because they got to save the planet, right? And so you got $1 million of Ethereum. Now, that Ethereum has appreciated maybe 100% over the last year. It's gone from $500,000 to $1 million. Doesn't matter. They're going to be taxing the Ethereum with all your other assets at that value that they determine the wealth tax needs to be incurred. Okay, so that means you're going to have to pay essentially an unrealized capital gains tax. And if the tax is, let's say, 10%, which, if it's a wealth tax, it's going to start at maybe like 1 or 2%. They just need a little bit to get through the door. Same thing with the income tax back in 1913. It was just for the top highest 1%, and it was for 1 or 2%. And then it moved its way down to pretty much everybody else in the population. But they're going to start at a low percent. But let's just say it's 10%. Okay, so you made $50,000 or $500,000 on the appreciation of that Ethereum. You're paying 10% on all your wealth, and so you're going to be paying $100,000 on your Ethereum, even though you haven't sold any Ethereum, and even if you did, you'd only pay a tax on that $500,000. Okay, and who knows what that would be at? I mean, if you're, I guess, in the top tax bracket, that'd be 25% for long-term capital gains, assuming you held it for longer than a year. If not, it's ordinary income, in which case it would be 39.6%. So maybe you're getting a deal on the wealth tax, but still, you're going to have to raise cash in order to pay that tax, which means you're going to have to sell some of that Ethereum, right? So even though you didn't sell the Ethereum, you're still going to have to pay tax on it, which means you're probably going to have to sell it anyway in order to get the capital to pay those taxes. So that's what the UN is recommending right now. And NerdWallet says governments might assess a wealth tax one time, sporadically, or on a regular basis, depending on their laws or policies. Right, it's totally up to them. And you could scream, this is unreasonable as much as you want. People did that all day with the income tax. They're like, oh, this is a violation of the 16th Amendment. Doesn't matter. It's part of the law. And people still get arrested protesting it. You can do nothing about it, right? But I'll tell you what a lot of people probably will do about it, and I don't recommend this, but a lot of people are going to look for ways that they could get their assets off the system, and there are certain technologies out there which may be able to do that rather effectively. I don't know. You guys think of one? Maybe. But I don't recommend anything. Pay your taxes, blah, blah, blah. But it says the U.S. does not levy a general wealth tax. Not yet, anyway. So, boo. That's basically what that is. I thought there'd be more to read. Wealth is the value of somebody's assets. You guys are smart. You guys understand what this means, right? So unrealized capital gains taxes definitely going to play into this at some point. And they're going to be able to do it easily because they're going to say, well, we need to tax the wealthy people. Just like they're pointing fingers at the corporations, they're going to point fingers at the wealthy too. The politicians will always go for a scapegoat. Sort of what you're looking at right now with Biden pointing his finger at like bodega shops and gas companies for having the price of gas too high. Has nothing to do with them, right? The politicians will always deflect blame. And so they're going to blame the corporations and the wealthy. But the policies that they institute for the corporation, the wealthy, are going to affect everybody else in some way. And it's going to play into this larger agenda. So this is already going on longer than I thought it would be because there's still a lot to get to. But check this out. This is Lawrence Leopard. He's a Bitcoin bro. Fix the money, fix the world, bro. So just everyone adopt Bitcoin, will be fine. He's that kind of guy. Shortages incoming. Okay, so he understands this kind of thing will cause shortages. He understands the logic. Gold people are smart. They really are. They understand how money works. But for whatever reason, a lot of people just can't connect these dots for some reason. Maybe they just don't know that Monero is totally taking over the dark webs. Maybe they don't know how not private Bitcoin is. Maybe there's just a lack of education out there about what Monero is, what Bitcoin is. And I honestly think that's the case. Because even amongst a lot of the big Bitcoin bros, you have a lack of education about Monero. I mean, here's one instance right here. This is Peter Todd, who is a Bitcoin bro, but he's also a Monero bro too. He runs a Monero node. But here he is right here talking about how Monero nodes can't prune. They can't prune the blockchain. And because he thinks they can't prune the blockchain, that means they don't have the storage to have the blockchain, which means that cuts a lot of people out from being potential node operators, which interferes with its capacity to scale. But a quick Google search will show, yes, we can prune the blockchain. And then he goes on to try to justify what he said down here when people educated him that, yes, you can prune the Monero blockchain if you're a node operator by saying, oh, I was talking about a different type of pruning. It doesn't prune like Bitcoin does. Okay, well, here you go. You can have a different definition of pruning if you want to, but this is pruning. But let's not even get into all this. You can get into the technicals if you want to, but I'm just using that as a demonstration that people don't know how this stuff works, and they don't understand just how awesome Monero is as a cryptocurrency. It's not just like some random privacy coin. And this is where a lot of people miss out. It's way more than just a privacy coin. And by the way, the implications of it being private are enormous for actually having functionality as a currency. But beyond that, you've got the fact that you can mine the stuff with a laptop. Boom, that's crazy. You've got decentralized mining pools, peer-to-peer mining pools. That's crazy. Okay, you've got transaction costs that average a penny or less. That's wild. Okay, you got cake pay. You got so many things going on. It's insane. You got Haveno coming out soon, I think, which is a private decentralized peer-to-peer exchange. I mean, the Monero ecosystem is way more than just, oh, it's like kind of private or whatever. Seems kind of cool, but do I really need it? It's like, no. You got to look into this stuff. This is like the eighth wonder of the world. And I'm not saying that to be hyperbolic, but it's disappointing that you have so many people uneducated about Monero. But even if you don't understand all the things that go into it, like dynamic block size and the ASICs resistance or whatever, all the things that you could talk about, it doesn't take that much brain power to piece together the fact that price controls lead to shortages, lead to black markets. What's the black market currency, which is currently taking over the black markets? Maybe they don't know about that, but I'm trying to give a lot of benefit to the doubt, but you guys know what I mean. we see so many Bitcoin bros where it's like, how is it possible that you haven't come to concede Monero, if not better than Bitcoin, then has a lot of value to provide? But they won't say it. A lot of them just won't say it. They don't want to talk about it. And we're going to get to another example of Leah Hepburn, if we have time, where she's talking about carbon rationing and how the CBDC is bad for that. But look, if you've got the government tracking your purchases and them punishing you if you go over a certain allotted amount of carbon consumption based on your transactions, okay, it doesn't just, they don't need you to have a CBDC to do that. Do you understand? Like, all they need to do is have your financial activity tied to your Social Security information or your personal tax identification information, and then they can just look at your transactions on the public blockchain and then come to surmise what your carbon impact is from that. Like, do people not think about this? Do I overanalyze this, perhaps? I mean, you guys let me know what you think. I'm curious, because it could be we're overthinking this, but I really don't think I am. Nobody else out there is coming up with these ideas and piecing these dots together. You know what I mean? It's sort of just like you see all this cognitive dissonance happening, but nobody has the self-reflective capacity, it seems, to say, hey, you know, Bitcoin totally tracked and traced. The only thing that makes it better than a CBDC is that they can't necessarily print it. And maybe they can't do like some time expiration scheme on the currencies that I have in my wallet, and they can't prevent me from spending it. But other than that, yeah, it's totally tracked and traced. They can still use AI algorithms to track what I'm doing with my money, come up with judgments about it, maybe apply syntaxes, maybe knock on my door if they don't like a transaction I'm making, maybe blacklist my coins and cut me out of the system that way. Like, there's no second level thinking like that. It's just like CBDC bad, Bitcoin good. You know what I mean? Let me know what you guys think. And I'm not mad at these people. I'm not condemning these people. It's just perplexing to me. It's just very perplexing to me. And it can't just be this concern about an inflation bug. It can't just be this concern about scalability, because these are like second order concerns. These are not relevant to the immediate concern of shortages in the booming of black markets, for instance. This stuff is, I really don't think this is that hard to comprehend, but, you know, let me know what you think. Let me know what you think. Anyways, moving on. We're about to get into some more interesting news on the legal front of KYC and AML. This has been a development which has been taking place with ever more increasing rapidity over the last year and a half. Got to take a breath real quick, but this is from Watcher.guru. It says Mastercard gets further into crypto new security product. Check out our Mastercard video on the crypto world order. They're hugely involved in the legacy financial system, obviously, but just they are integral to the power structure. If you look at who is on the board of MasterCard and the MasterCard Foundation, which comprises 10% or so of the board of MasterCard, then you find the UN, you find the Trilateral Commission, you find the Council on Foreign Relations, you find all those guys tied in with MasterCard. And MasterCard, I think, is invested in like over 200 cryptocurrency projects. And as this article is going to note here, they purchased Ciphertrace. And Ciphertrace is one of the big forensic data analytical companies, which is analyzing everything that's going on the blockchain. They're making relationships with governments. They're making relationships with crypto exchanges. And they come out every other year, it seems, to tell everybody, hey, we cracked Monero, even though they didn't. Right. But they're trying to crack Monero. And they're essentially creating a database with all the information about what's going on in crypto land on the blockchain. They're linking identities to people. They're setting up these honeypots that we've read about before here on the channel, where if somebody goes to Block Explorer to check on their Bitcoin transaction, for instance, and to see how many confirmations it has, whatever, like, you have these companies like Chainalysis and Ciphertrace picking up people's IP addresses to link that to the transaction that they're looking at and then to their wallets. So, yeah, they're building up a huge database, okay? So let's read this, This says Mastercard, one of the largest financial service providers in the world, is set to launch a new security tool on Tuesday. In an official press release, the firm said that the new product will help banks identify and stop transactions coming from vulnerable crypto exchanges. Okay, interesting. So essentially, what does that mean? It means they're going to be tracking what goes onto the exchange, what comes off. Now, it's already been happening here for a little bit of a while. Sorry, I thought I saw something interesting. They've already been doing that for a while. We've already seen so many stories here of people's accounts being shut down and people getting letters even from exchanges like Gemini saying, hey, we noticed you sent your crypto to Trade Ogre, right? Our lovely Trade Ogre. No, we love Trade Ogre. But they say this is a highly suspicious activity. Give us the reason that you took your crypto here, blah, blah, blah. We're going to shut down your account. It's already happening. But I guess it's newsworthy that Mastercard itself is getting involved with this, because also consider this. We've discussed this with the Digital Currency Group, who Mastercard is significantly invested in, by the way. Digital Currency Group is invested in exchanges all over the world. In the videos that we've done about the Digital Currency Group, they have exchanges in Japan, in Dubai, in South Africa, in South America, United States, other places in Europe, pretty much all over the world, Mexico. And so Mastercard, who's invested in the Digital Currency Group, is going to now probably be the prime partner involved with surveilling what's going on the exchanges and, by the way, off the exchanges. Okay, so you're starting to see it all come together. The tool called Crypto Secure uses artificial intelligence algorithms to assess the likelihood of criminal activity. Okay, so how long before they start to work with law enforcement and you start to become guilty before proven innocent as a result of this? Because you not being able to use an exchange, especially if you're a business, that could have material consequences for you. And if you get shut off of exchanges, or maybe you get kicked out of the crypto financial system, as it's said, as you could say, then that could have real material implications for you. And who knows if law enforcement gets involved in that? Who knows if banks get involved in that? They start working with traditional banks, and then it's harder for you to get loans. So think about all this stuff. Related to cryptocurrency exchanges on the Mastercard payment network, the system makes use of information from multiple sources, including the blockchain. Right. As we said, anything can and will be used against you in a court of law on the public blockchain. It is public information. There's court precedent for that. The tool has color-coded ratings that depict suspicious behavior on exchanges. Oh, and this is going to play in perfectly with the next article that we've got coming, which is about the expansion of the Bank Secrecy Act and the AML laws, which is going to make it, again, so accountants, third-party payment processing companies, and people involved in those companies, like Venmo, like Cash App, they're going to have to file suspicious activity reports on people if this law passes, okay? So, again, people are just going to be forced into Monero. I'm telling you, as sure as I'm sitting here. And the tax pros have been getting involved with exchanges. Now the exchanges are going to be issuing 1099s that compile the taxable activity that you have on exchanges. It's going to increase the demand for Haveno. Not saying to evade taxes again. Don't do that. But I'm saying people are going to get those 1099s. They're going to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I have to pay this many in taxes. And then they're going to look for probably a private exchange to transact on. And I'm not saying, again, they should do that. I'm just telling you what the incentives are. Again, you tax more of that which you want less of, and you subsidize that which you want more of. People just react to incentives. It's very obvious. And the rich are going to do this too, because I didn't get to this with the UN article, but they're also going to be cracking down on tax havens. And that's going to increase the incentives. Where was I? Okay. Yeah, red denotes high risk, while green denotes low. Furthermore, the tool does not decide whether to reject a certain crypto merchant. It is up to the card issuers to make that choice. And who are the card issuers? Could it be, I don't know, Mastercard? So it's just basically one big thing. The Crypto Secure tool is powered by Ciphertrace. Ciphertrace is a blockchain security startup based in California. Yeah, we know who Ciphertrace are. And remember, guys, what is that which set this in motion? What's the impetus for this? To combat fraud. And how many times have we seen this, ladies and gentlemen? Over and over and over again. We see the expansion of KYC, AML in crypto ATMs, watchtower nodes on the Lightning Network, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's always to combat fraud, the expansion of financial surveillance. So it's just one of those hallmark things to look for, right? The idea is that the kind of trust we provide for digital commerce transactions, we want to be able to provide the same kind of trust to digital asset transactions for consumers, banks, and merchants. So yeah, that's the main thing I wanted to get to. Just wanted to give you guys an update on that. Very interesting stuff. Moving on. Jameson Lopp. This is just an interesting stat here. Global Bitcoin ATM installations recorded a net negative change for the first time ever last month. So you got adoption taking a little bit of a dip. Now, that probably has a little bit to do with the market, I want to say. But who knows? Who knows? I've heard that the amount of KYC you have to go through to use a Bitcoin exchange is beyond ridiculous. I've never used one, but that's just what I've heard. People won't even use them. And we've talked about Monero crypto ATMs here on the channel. Go find that video. One interesting thing that we noted about when we were reading the legal disclosures was a section on biometric data, how they can collect biometric data from you and they can send that to third parties as per necessary, according to them, if I remember right. Go watch the video. We go into it. But yeah, it's going to get worse in regards to that. They're going to want all the information they can get on you, especially if you're using a Monero ATM. Best to just use probably local Monero, in my opinion. There will be consolidation. Global KYC AML regs have severely hurt the potential of Bitcoin ATMs for now. Now, I don't understand where Odell gets the perspective that this is just a temporary thing, because as we're about to get to, it's only getting worse, the KYC. So this is what I want to get to next. Let me take a quick break, and we'll come back with the discussion. All right, so this is from Accounting Today. Lawmakers introduce bill to expand anti-money laundering due diligence by finance pros. So this is called the Enable Act, or Enablers Act, establishing new authorities for businesses laundering and enabling risk security act. That's a freaking mouthful. Lovely. But what I want to point out first is that this is bipartisan legislation introduced by a Democrat, Sheldon Whitehouse, and Republican Roger Wicker. And I'd mentioned this before in a tweet, and I said that the KYC AML crypto capture agenda is going to be bipartisan. There's no doubt about it, because whenever it comes to the security of the bureaucratic state, the banks, etc., it's a bipartisan effort. They may look like they disagree on how many genders there are and who should play in whose sports, but when it comes to the real agenda, it's bipartisan, okay? And this is one of those things. And this is going to have a lot of implications. Let's get into it. It aims to strengthen federal due diligence and transparency requirements to include American professionals such as investment advisors, attorneys, and accountants. Okay, and they're saying that their skills are often exploited to hide illicit money to carry out financial crimes. So they're going to include it as an amendment to the must-pass Defense Authorization Bill set to pass by the end of the year. Okay, and so, yeah, that's how they're going to get it in there. But check this out. This is everybody who's going to be affected by this, according to Accounting Today. This bill would expand the definition of a financial institution for purposes of reporting suspicious transactions, anti-money laundering programs, and other related measures to include CPAs and public accounting firms, people who provide investment advice for compensation, people who trade in works of art, antiques, or collectibles, attorneys, law firms, or notaries involved in financial or related activity on behalf of another person, trusts, blah, blah, blah. This is interesting. People engaged in the business of public relations marketing. So Marketers and public relations people are going to be involved. Communications or other similar services in such a manner as to provide another person anonymity or deniability. Okay, so they're cracking down on anonymity and deniability. They put it right there. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, people engaged in the business of providing third-party payment services. Okay, so crypto exchanges, Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, all going to be involved. And do you guys remember, well, maybe, I can't quite remember the story. I think it had to do with something like these third-party payment providers, if there are transactions of over $600 for somebody, they are going to have to send them a 1099, which discloses how much money they made from those third-party payment providers. I think that was passed as legislation. I'm going to have to double-check that. But again, the trend is just capturing all the financial data to prevent as much money leaking out of the system as possible. They want as much as possible to be recorded. They want as much as possible to be taxed and then surveilled and earmarked for data. Okay, that is the agenda. They don't want you to have privacy. But I think you as Monero Bros are well aware of that, especially after looking at what they did to the Tornado Cash Bro, the developer on there. And that kind of plays into all this too. They don't want you to have privacy solutions, especially as it relates to finance. They're just going to presume like it's just criminal to use those kinds of things. Now, Monero, as we talked about in that one video, does have some legal justification. Perkins Coie came out with a paper because it's got view and spend keys, and people can opt into regulation with Monero. It does have that sort of legal plausible deniability, but nevertheless, we can expect them to crack down if they really want that to happen. But what is the justification for this bill, you may ask? Well, we want to stop Putin and his cronies, basically. So look at it right here. Dictators, criminals, terrorists, right? So they're using the United States as a choice for hiding dirty money, right? And this is coming from the people laundering billions of dollars through Zelensky Bro in Ukraine. So Pandora Papers, there you go there. Yeah. And by the way, again, the people passing this bill are the people who make, what is it, $400,000, $300,000 as a congressman. That's your yearly salary, but somehow they have net worths of like hundreds of millions of dollars. You may ask how that is. Well, it's because they're kleptocrats. And who's this supposed to crack down on? Well, as you'll see here, kleptocrats. So, pot, meat, kettle, right? But that is their justification. And one thing that's going to be interesting is what they're going to do with crypto, because a story that I found here, which is somewhat recent, this is back in the news, Russia to allow international trade in Bitcoin crypto for any industry. So at least the Ministry of Finance is opening up a little bit to crypto. There seems to be somewhat of a disagreement, though, with the central bank over in Russia as to how much they should legalize this and integrate it into their financial system. But here we look, it says it's hard to sanction adversaries like Russia when our weak money laundering laws enable the targets of those sanctions to hide their assets right under our noses, said Representative Melenkowski. So they want to close those loopholes. Now, what's that going to comprise? Are they going to, I don't know, make Bitcoin miners here in the United States, who now largely comprise of corporates, are they going to make them comply with OFAC blacklists and regulations? Are they going to have compliant mining pools? Questions I have. I think that's highly likely. Now, there are people out there who think that the Bitcoin mining corporates in the United States already are OFAC mining compliant. They just haven't said anything. They just, by default, went to go comply because they knew at some point that was going to be necessary. They just kind of thought ahead, and they're like, okay, well, let's just do what Marathon Mining did in Canada and just get this set up so that when the time comes, when they do crack down on, KYC for mining operations and AML, we'll be already ready for that. I mean, I assure you, there's a lobbying campaign that's probably happening already. like somebody's coming up with some technology that's sophisticated in screening for the risk of certain transactions being chosen for inclusion into blocks, sort of how Ciphertrace with Mastercard are going to be looking at transactions coming to and from exchanges. There are probably tech companies working on analyzing transactions which are going to be included in the blocks for the Bitcoin mining corporates. Okay, and then those people are going to lobby the government. They're going to say, "Hey, Russia is using crypto now. They're integrating into their financial system. They're our enemy. Therefore, we should make everybody OFAC compliant. Anybody who wants to mine Bitcoin, maybe you need a permit to do this stuff, right? Because of the implications of helping people evading sanctions and whatever, right? So I'm just kind of trying to piece together the incentive structure which could be coming about because of this. But this is the direction things are going to go for crypto, especially for crypto, which can be tracked and traced because it has that capacity there. I mean, the Bitcoin bros can say all day long, hey, we're going to prevent this from happening. We're going to keep it freedom money. Okay, it doesn't matter because you already have the loophole there. You already have it. Like you don't even need a Trojan horse necessarily. The gate's already open. The data is already getting out. And you have to go through layer 2 funny solutions in order to try to keep this stuff private, which works maybe 5% of the time successfully if you're actually trying to evade the law enforcement people. Excuse me. But yeah, advertisers want that data. Law enforcement wants that data. The tax pros want that data, the IRS. And so they're going to come up with all the technologies possible and regulations in order to make that happen. You think you're going to stop that? I don't think so. I don't think so. They have every incentive to make sure that that is pried open for everybody to see. Okay. But let's get to this analysis. This is the best analysis from a law firm that I found on the Enablers Act. There's some really good information in here. Closing the Gate, House adopts Enablers Act Amendment to 2023 NDAA. This is July 1st, 2022. But there's news now coming out about it here in October, which seems to look like it's going to pass. But let's read this. This is something which has slipped under the radar for some reason. I haven't seen anybody comment on this. But amendments focus on professional, quote-unquote, gatekeepers, lawyers, accountants, payment processors, and those providing corporate formation and trust services. Okay. So this is an expansion of the Bank Secrecy Act, Anti-Money Laundering Act. And it was on one of these that there was a representative who said that this would be the greatest expansion of anti-money laundering laws in the United States since the Patriot Act. I forgot where that was, but one of these representatives said that, just to give you an idea of the enormity of this bill. But the sweeping AML Act of 2020 was passed because it was also tucked into the massive defense spending authorization bill for that year, just like this will be. So they're going to slip this in. Very likely it's going to pass. And they say this amendment is even more sweeping than the 2020 AML Act. As we will discuss, it applies to the Bank Secrecy Act. It applies the Bank Secrecy Act to persons providing corporate formation, trust, third-party payment, or similar legal or accounting services. The amendment's application of third-party payment processors, depending on how that term ultimately gets defined, if the amendment becomes law, also could be very significant development affecting many businesses and financial technology companies, quote-unquote, fintechs. Okay. So I'm interested to see how this plays out, but the general idea is much more financial surveillance. The amendment's findings, quote-unquote, section catalogs various instances of alleged kleptocratic and corrupt behavior, including but not limited to the disclosures of the Pandora Papers, notorious instance of investigative journalism in which an investigator for a nonprofit posed as an advisor. Well, we don't need to get into the story. Basically, it was a huge operation for rich people using shell companies to offshore a lot of their cash. So they expand the definition of financial institution covered by the Bank Secrecy Act They've got all those people there. But in other words, if you provide corporate formation, trust, third-party payment, or similar legal or accounting services, you could be considered a quote-unquote financial institution under the Bank Secrecy Act, and therefore have various AML responsibilities, including possibly the duty to maintain an AML program and file suspicious activity reports regarding your customers and clients. So it's going to be Soviet. You're going to have these programs in place to basically rat out your own customers and clients. And the Secretary of State said that they're going to conduct random audits of people, from what I read. And they're going to make sure that these are being applied. And that means that everybody's going to have some incentive to report something to make it look like they're not complying with this law, or just to make sure they're complying with this law. Said another way, they're going to rat out some people, right? It's just like cops. It's like they have a quota, quote unquote, where it's like they want to pull over some people before the month is over to justify that they're doing their job. And the same thing is probably going to happen with a lot of these third-party payment processors, where if they don't have anything to report, they're just going to lower the standard for what is considered suspicious activity. Okay, so it's going to become that much more sketchy. It's going to become that much more sketchy. And given that this is going to be a new law, and it's not going to be well defined what a proper AML program is for a lot of these quote-unquote new financial institutions, well, that means there's going to be perhaps selectivity and a lot of subjectivity involved in this. And there may be variables at play which comprise more than just the data, but how much they may like or dislike somebody. Okay, so this is stuff to consider here. Me as an accountant, I don't like the sound of this. This sounds like just more red tape I'm going to have to freaking deal with. I mean, one thing that, total aside, but one thing that I've found frustrating to some degree at my job is we run into a lot of interesting tax situations. And you wouldn't believe sometimes the amount of research we have to do in like the federal regs and code to figure out how to approach certain dilemmas. Like somebody's got a property, right? And they have a really big property, but it's their primary residence, essentially all their property. And they establish this thing being their primary residence by putting like benches everywhere. And we're talking about a property which is like, hundreds of acres, right? So you've got the question of like, what is a primary residence? And then you have like the government, conscripting property in order to allow a pipeline or some other public infrastructure to be built. And then you've got to figure out how the tax implications for that are. And to make it more complicated, in this particular instance, you've got, maybe somebody who is passing on this land, this property as inheritance to somebody, and then you have to figure out what the stepped-up basis is as all this stuff is going on, which means you have to get an appraiser. It can get super complicated, a lot of this stuff. But what's going to be the product of this? Okay, well, maybe the outcome is that person pays an extra $200,000 in tax, which is a lot to that person. It's a lot to most people. Okay, how fast is that money going to be spent by the government, who just hit $31 trillion in debt? They're going to spend that money in a snap. They're going to send it to frickin' Ukraine. And we did all this work, we did all this research for days to figure out how to properly approach this. And the fruits of our labor are what? Nothing. It just gets, it's useless. But anyways, that's a whole other rant. But it's really just for them to keep tabs on the population, I think. It's sort of like just with all this tax stuff, it's a way that they can have leverage over everybody. Like if they don't like you, they can just come after you for an audit. And, it just makes your life miserable because you got to spend money and you're dealing with the government. It's never fun to undergo an audit. But that's a whole other thing. Anyways. The filing of suspicious activity reports, other potential record-keeping and reporting obligations, and enhanced due diligence for private banking and corresponding banking relationships with foreign persons Different gatekeepers could have different AML responsibilities, and this gets into the technical stuff, but now they're talking about the audits. But this needs to be talked about because this, more than anything, just compounds a trend that we're seeing. Growing AML, growing KYC, the surveillance of everything going on. And if you think that they're doing this with accountants and people who aren't even using crypto, which the government already sees as something which is being used by criminals and dark forces, right? And now apparently Russia. What do you think is going to come next? Much more regulation, much more surveillance, etc. It's going to make people want to get into Monero. So here's a little comment on Tornado Cash from Odell. He says, Tornado Cash is barely used now. Tornado Cash developer still in jail. Assets are being auctioned. Most used ETH in a fully transparent manner with little thought to privacy. Most stakers are focused on regulatory compliance. Few care. The attack worked, and all it took was a U.S. government blog post. Right? That's all it takes. That's all it takes. Like, everyone thinks they have diamond hands, and we're going to lead this revolution against the central banks. All we need to do is hold our crypto. We just need to build these parallel economies. How many of these people are actually serious? It's a question you got to ask. How many people are actually serious about making crypto work? Because it's going to get down to crunch time at some point, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to get down to crunch time, and you're going to have to choose the crypto which allows you to be private and be able to transact freely with your fellow man outside the system. You're going to have to pick the best one if you really want to succeed. But nobody that I'm seeing largely in the crypto sphere is doing that, except for people in Monero. It's just an investment consideration. Like, for people like Michael Saylor and the ilk, it's just like they don't want to touch Monero because their whole focus is on the gains. Their whole focus is on institutional adoption. The more regulations, the better. And they could look at everything we've gone through in this video and they could be like, yeah, that's great. I hope it continues. Like, they don't even care about freedom. They don't even care about the implications of everybody being introduced into a financial panopticon where everything they do is watched, everything they do is public. There's no privacy anymore. Everything can be used against you in a court of law. They can determine what transactions are legal and which ones are illegal, how that plays into your carbon footprint, how it plays into your social credit. All that can be done with these public blockchain cryptos. Absolutely. Because all that they need to do is have your wallet tied to your taxpayer identification number, into your ID. And they can link that into social credit. They can link that into an algorithmic AI carbon tracker, etc. But nobody cares about that. Nobody really cares. And that's the biggest flaw, I think, that's in the super hyper mega bullish case is the human element. It's like, do people care? Are people going to piece this together and be like, hey, you know, I actually have some survival instinct and I want to get my money off the system and I want my financial future to be somewhat secure and out of the hands of these crazy despots and megalomaniacs and financially irresponsible people, right? But who knows? Who knows? I mean, I think at some point you're going to have a lot of people who do care, who are in this sphere, be like, hey, we need to actually start to consider Monero. And I think it's actually the best crypto out there. And then you get other people who start to follow them, and it becomes a thing. But you need to break that glass ceiling. You know what I mean? It's great that I'm seeing more people make Monero accounts and talk about it. I love seeing the Monero reply guys, no matter what people say out there about them. Because it needs to hit a critical mass, and we're still a ways away from hitting that. But once an excitement really starts to brew about Monero, I think it's going to really get fired up out there. But you know, I don't know how much time we really have for that to happen. But one thing that's, you know, kind of telling as to how far away we are of that happening is, sorry, running out of breath. This climate narrative is really starting to get into the crypto land, which is hilarious. But researchers allege Bitcoin's climate impact is closer to digital crude than gold. Right. So Bitcoin mining raises a set of red flags for consideration as a sustainable sector, according to researchers. So this whole thing is going to continue down the path. I mean, could you imagine 3 or 4 years ago people talking about the climate implications of cryptocurrency? I mean, was that a thing? I don't think so. Nobody talked about that. Nobody cared. But now it's a thing. And it's now a normal conversation. It's part of the discussion in crypto land as to whether or not a crypto is environmentally friendly or not. And I can't emphasize just how little this matters. It matters so little. I mean, the potential upside of crypto versus the potential downside of whatever environmental impact that this causes. I mean, guys, the government just blew up a pipeline in the Baltic Sea, which had caused environmental damage and climate damage, according to researches that I've read, which is akin to all the oil and gas firms have caused over the last 20 years, or something crazy like that, some crazy statistic. And it was state sabotage by probably a government which purports to care about all this climate change crap. Okay? It's not a serious conversation. It's a non-starter because you know what the direction is. It's total control over crypto. That's all it's about. And it's really crazy. It's really crazy that that's the conversation being had, but hopefully people start to take a more serious bent. Sustainable energy usage for Bitcoin mining grows nearly 60% in a year. People will read this and be like, that's great. People are going to, governments are going to accept our crypto then. It's like, it doesn't matter. It just does not matter. I'm telling you. Swift partners. This is just an update on the crypto coup d'etat. Swift partners with crypto data provider Chainlink on cross-chain protocol and TradFi Play. So Chainlink is now working with Swift, which is interesting. It's the interbank messaging system that allows for cross-border payments. It allows for also the United States to sanction countries all over the world. And yeah, that's what's going on. Reminder, Chainlink is part of the World Economic Forum. As a technology pioneer, and we could go on. Co-founder Sergey Nazarov invited to participate at the World Economic Forum activities throughout the year. Yeah, so there's that. A couple more quick news stories. Bandwidth to consumption. Sorry, it's getting late. It's almost midnight. Bandwidth consumption to ease of setup. Many in the Ethereum community don't think staking is for the common user yet. So more centralization. 45% of Ethereum blocks currently being validated run MEV boost relay flashbots and comply with the United States sanctions, according to CEO of blockchain development agency Labors, or however you say that. And then we're just going to wrap up right now with our Bitcoin Bro of the Week, which I think I'm going to make a new segment. Because every week I find a Bitcoin bro who's got some funny thing to say. Some dude taking a big L, right? Flat Jaff. Now, this guy kind of caused a little bit of an uproar out there. He said, any giant organization wants to spend money to ensure Bitcoin success. I believe the best use of your money is to fund attacks against Ethereum and Monero. So this Bitcoin bro, he's trying to get a grant to spend Bitcoin on Monero and then spend his Monero in such a way that it spams the network and causes it to crash. Now, obviously, this guy knows nothing about dynamic block size and how there isn't a fixed rate structure for fees on the Monero blockchain, just how this has already been discussed for years. And there have already been research papers and everything. But the Bitcoin bro is resorting to just attacking Monero. Like he thinks he can just get away with it. And yeah, people are upset by this, and that's fine. There's no reason to be upset, I think. If this guy wants to test the Monero blockchain, it's going to cause like a Streisand effect. Because the Bitcoin bros are going to look at this experiment, and then they're going to see how scalable Monero actually is and how it's already been fitted to adapt to attacks like this. Because, again, the Monero bros just think of freaking every possible attack vector to try to protect the crypto against it. Because because they share the same healthy skepticism that we do. And they've come up with a solution for this. Now, will it bloat the network a little bit? Yeah, sure, but it's going to cost you a good bit of money, and ultimately it's going to fail. If what Arctic Mind says and what he's done remains true, which I think, given our conversations with him, he's got a pretty good idea of this stuff. Arctic Mind, he made his way over to Monero, not because of the privacy, but because of the scalability. He doesn't think Bitcoin scales. And I think he's quite right in that. You can only process 7 transactions per second, no matter how much you can prune the blockchain, according to Peter Todd. And by the way, Peter Todd has talked about how Bitcoin's lack of tail emission is a problem. And he actually praises Monero for having tail emission for long-term sustainability. But, Arctic Mind has problems with the scalability of Lightning Network and Bitcoin. You can check out our interview with him. I got to get him back. We used to have really great conversations. And I love talking with Arctic Mind because he talks a lot. He'll just go on these genius rants. Like milk and honey will just flow from his genius brain. And you can just kind of take it in. It's awesome. And I don't have to do much of any work at all when I talk to him. So I might have to get him back and just kind of like tease out some more brilliant bit nuggets for you guys. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I think that's all I want to talk about for now. I think that's it. Thank you guys for tuning in, and thank you for the donations and the support for continuing. It's great. And come check out the church on October 15th, 16th. I think you guys will get some good value from that. It's a beautiful church. It's really great. Some wonderful people there. And that's about it. It is midnight, so I'm going to go to bed. It was good to see you guys. I've got tax day coming up, so I'm probably not going to make a video here in the next couple weeks because I'm going to be very busy. Also trying to get a house going. So I've got a lot of things in transit at the moment. But I wanted to report on this because, again, the super hyper mega bullish case is coming along fine. It's just a matter of when are people going to figure this freaking stuff out. So share the video, share the info and the intel, get other people on board to this stuff because it really does make a lot of sense. And that's it. Love you guys a long time. My name is Matteo. God bless you guys. Have a good one. Bye-bye.